It started on a cold Thursday evening in early February, the kind of night where everything feels heavier. The sky was the color of wet concrete, the air still, and the streets of Oakview, a quiet suburb outside of Portland, looked half asleep. By all accounts, the Wilson family had every reason to feel safe. They lived in a tidy two-story house at the end of a cul-de-sac, surrounded by neighbors who waved when they passed. The kind of neighborhood where people still borrowed sugar and mowed each other's lawns. But what happened that night would remind everyone that safety, sometimes, is just an illusion. At 6:47 p.m., the Wilsons' home security camera caught 17-year-old Ethan Wilson walking up the front porch steps. He had just finished basketball practice. You can see him juggling his backpack, earbuds in, scrolling through his phone. A normal teenage moment. He steps inside, and the door closes behind him. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. At 9:03 p.m., Ethan's mother, Melissa, went upstairs to call him for dinner. The lights were on in his room, the door slightly open. His backpack was on the floor. But his phone, the one he never went anywhere without, was lying face down on the bed. His sneakers were gone. At first, she thought maybe he'd stepped out to see a friend. But when midnight came and there was still no sign of him, the unease turned into panic. By 1 a.m., the Wilsons called the police. Officers arrived, took statements, and did the usual, a missing persons report, a bolo for the car, though Ethan didn't have one. They checked nearby cameras. No forced entry. No struggle. Just silence. At 6:22 the next morning, Melissa's phone rang. A blocked number. She answered, groggy and terrified. The voice on the other end was distorted, mechanical, but the words were clear. "We have your son. Do not call the police again." Melissa froze. Her husband, David, took the phone. $150,000. Cash. No police. We'll call with instructions. Then the line went dead. The Wilsons didn't know if it was real or some cruel prank. But a few minutes later, Melissa's phone buzzed again, a photo of Ethan. His face bruised, duct tape across his mouth. Behind him, a dark, empty room. The message read, 24 hours. Don't play games. Detectives immediately classified it as a kidnapping for ransom, rare, but not unheard of. The FBI joined the case within hours. They tapped the Wilsons' phones, set up surveillance, and began tracing every lead. The ransom amount wasn't astronomical, but it was specific, suggesting someone who knew the family. David owned a small construction company. Not rich, but comfortable. Enough to make them a target for someone desperate. Investigators combed through every connection, employees, old clients, friends, even Ethan's circle. One name stood out, Kyle Bennett. Kyle was 23, had worked briefly for David the previous summer, and had been fired after a series of thefts on job sites. He had a record, petty theft, assault, a drug charge. Nothing that screamed mastermind, but enough to make him a person of interest. When police checked Kyle's last known address, a small trailer outside town, he was gone. Neighbors said he'd left 2 nights earlier, right around when Ethan vanished. Then came the second call. This time, the voice was calm. Tomorrow. 8 p.m. You'll drive alone. I'll send the location. If I see cops, you'll never see your son again. David wanted to go alone. But the FBI insisted on monitoring. They fitted him with a wire, tracked the car, and sent agents nearby. They couldn't risk losing the boy. Friday evening, David drove into the hills outside Oakview. The GPS location sent to his phone led him to an abandoned lumber yard, piles of rotting wood, rusted machinery, and the smell of oil and wet pine. He parked where instructed and waited. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. Then his phone buzzed again. Walk to the red shed. Leave the bag. He followed the instructions, hands shaking as he carried the duffel bag filled with cash, unmarked bills, all recorded. He set it down by the door and stepped back. No one appeared. Then, the shed door creaked open. A man in a ski mask stepped out, glanced at David, then kicked the bag inside. "We'll call you," he said, before disappearing into the dark. It was over in seconds. David drove home, numb. He hadn't seen Ethan. He hadn't heard his voice. Just that phrase, "We'll call you." Hours passed. Then days. No call. No message. Just silence. When investigators finally located Kyle Bennett's truck 3 days later, abandoned near an old quarry, they found traces of Ethan's blood inside. The following morning, a hiker stumbled upon something wrapped in a tarp in the woods 5 miles away. It was Ethan. He had been dead for at least 48 hours. A single gunshot wound to the chest. The ransom had been for nothing. The FBI swarmed the area, tracing phone records, surveillance footage, and anyone connected to Kyle. Within hours, they found him, holed up at a rundown motel off Highway 17, trying to buy a bus ticket out of state. When agents raided the room, he didn't resist. He just looked tired. Inside, they found the duffel bag, still full of cash. He hadn't even touched it. In his first interview, Kyle broke down almost immediately. He said it wasn't supposed to happen like that. That he hadn't meant to kill Ethan. That he just wanted money to pay off people he owed. According to his statement, Ethan had recognized him, called him by name, and panicked. In the chaos, the gun went off. One mistake. One split second. And a boy was gone. At trial, Kyle's defense tried to argue it was accidental. But the evidence told a darker story: the planning, the burner phones, the ransom photos. It wasn't desperation. It was greed. He was sentenced to life without parole. The Wilson family sat in the front row as the verdict was read. Melissa didn't cry. She just stared at the floor, her hands clasped so tightly they turned white. In interviews later, she said the part that haunted her most wasn't the moment she found out Ethan was gone, it was the waiting. The endless hours between hope and truth. After the sentencing, David closed his business. The house went up for sale within months. Oakview never felt like home again. Neighbors still remember that family. How ordinary they were. How fast everything changed. There's a short clip, the last piece of footage anyone ever saw of Ethan. From that security camera. You can see him smiling faintly as he walks toward the door, tossing his keys in the air. A normal kid on a normal night. It's only a few seconds long, but when you watch it knowing what came next, it feels like forever. Because in that moment, he still believed he was safe. He still believed in tomorrow. And that's the thing about stories like this, they remind us how thin the line really is between normal life and tragedy. One knock on the door. One wrong decision. One phone call. And a family that once felt untouchable learns just how fast everything can disappear. Sometimes the scariest part of a story isn't the crime itself. It's the silence that follows.